Baku's a notoriously difficult circuit to qualify on. The walls are very close, it's high speed, there's some really tricky braking zones, and we've seen red flags in the past. Last year there were 4 in qualifying, and this year there was 1 in Q1, and it was Lance Stroll, one of the men who crashed out in Q1 last year as well. And this time he crashed out twice. The first time was at turn 7, just nosed it in a little bit deep on the brakes and managed to actually keep the car intact by going absolutely square in, a bit like Sebastian Vettel did later on in the other Aston Martin. But the second crash for Stroll was a little bit heavier, trying to turn around turn 2, carried in too much speed and took off the right front. And that was the red flag then, with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock.
And that is bad news for Schumacher, Latifi, Bottas and Albon.
Now at this point, there was enough time for drivers to get around and do one more lap, one more flyer on a circuit with high track evolution, like any street circuit is. But it was going to be really tight. The next moment of interest really came from Fernando Alonso, and Alex Albon particularly was very unhappy, very vocal on the radio, saying he thinks Alonso went off deliberately to try and bring out a yellow flag and mean that no one else behind him could improve. And I had to say, looking at the evidence, I agree. I think Alonso here maybe is on the limit of acceptability or over it, to be honest here. Let's have a look through and see what happened then with Fernando Alonso. First of all, it's an off into turn 15. It's a tricky corner, and Fernando takes to the escape road, as we have seen many drivers do throughout the weekend and in qualifying as well. It's normal. And when we come through here, what's a little bit less normal is the way that he's sort of steering and chopping the steering wheel into the corner. It's less usual. It's like he's got an instability at the rear end, and he's really fighting the car. And so he goes into the runoff area on a flying lap right at the end. This sort of thing happens. What's stranger about this one is you can see the delta time on the dash there. He's 1.14 seconds down on his previous best at this moment. So he's not on a very quick lap. He's on used tyres at this point. He's in 12th position, and he's basically not going to be improving by any stretch of the imagination. He's got 2 corners to go to try and make up 1.14 seconds. He's on his used tyres. He's got no slipstream ahead. It's not going to happen for him. So it's a little bit of a strange error to go on into this corner when you're so far down on your best. To be absolutely pushing the limits here to the point where you're nearly crashing is something that you maybe wouldn't expect Fernando Alonso, a driver of his calibre, to do. And then the way that he's sort of jiggling the steering wheel in, it looks a little bit strange. But Albon was particularly perplexed. He was the car just behind, and he was in the drop zone, as was Valtteri Bottas just behind Albon as well. So those two were roaring up behind Fernando Alonso on a flying lap, and actually they managed to sneak through because they were so close to Alonso at this point. The yellow flags didn't actually have time to come out. And here we get to see a decent shot then at exactly what's unfolding on this final outlap into the flying lap. So everyone's out there trying to improve, because you never know, you could be knocked out of Q1 if you don't. It was already going to be really marginal for drivers to get round in 2 minutes and 30 seconds to start a flying lap. At the time, the fastest lap was a 1 minute 42. And you want to be doing your outlap, preparing the tyres, making sure you get yourself into a good window, ideally with a bit of a slipstream, depending on which team you are, how close you want to be to the car in front and their simulations. And you can see the drivers ahead of Fernando, they're already safe. It's the 2 Mercedes and the 2 AlphaTauris, and then it's Fernando who's 5th on the road. And he does look like he backs up the pack on the outlap, but he's absolutely entitled to do this as well. He's got track position. He needs to make sure he does his outlap the way that he wants to do it. And if he wants to drop back from Gasly, that's absolutely fine. And he's allowed to get his elbows out a little bit more to make sure that he doesn't get overtaken, because, of course, he doesn't want to start a flying lap behind anyone else. But we can see, as Alonso launches into a fast lap now, he checks the mirrors because he doesn't want to be under pressure from the guys that he's just held back on the outlap. And you can see those guys behind him, Alex Albon, Valtteri Bottas, are the drivers that need to try and improve to maybe knock out 12th place man Fernando Alonso at this stage. Now Alonso, the decision to go on to used tyres as well, right at this stage, is a slightly interesting one. It's not necessarily the best choice if you want to try and improve your lap time with one flying lap to go, but of course it saves a set of tyres for him and his Alpine that was actually pretty quick through the rest of the weekend. So inevitably, as we get onto this lap, Alonso's not going to be improving. But he's entitled to do everything here. He's entitled to do the outlap at his pace, hold people back. That's how the luck of the draw goes with a late red flag in street circuits. What is interesting, though, about this part is where his head's at in this lap. So as he crosses the line now, he's on the radio asking his engineer, Carol Lewis, to say, let me know who crosses the line and who's going to get a lap in, which is a strange way to start your last flying lap as well. And then as we come through the last flyer, look on the left-hand side, how many times he's looking in the mirrors. There's a mirror check out of turn 1. Pretty unnecessary when you're on a flying lap here, trying to make yourself safe in Q1. We come out of turn 2, and again, mirror check. Still no one there. And you can see the driver tracker on the right-hand side. You still got Albon, you still got Bottas. His engineer now has told him everyone got through, but there's a bit of a melee in there, which is true. They were absolutely up against it to try and get a lap in. The Albon, Bottas, Latifi in there as well. They managed to just cross the line, but it was going to be touch and go. So Fernando now knows that there's drivers out there who can improve and knock him out on his used tyres. He comes out of turn 4, another little glance to the mirror. Come out of 6, another glance to the mirror. This is a very strange way to drive a flying lap. Coming out of 7, another check of the mirror. And we come out of turn 12, and there's another lengthy check of the mirror as well. So he's driving this flying lap, looking in his mirrors quite a lot. He's 1.1 seconds down at this point on his own personal best. And then here he goes then into the runoff area and parks it up there. And that's the end of Q1 for him. But fortunately, no one else did improve, and he managed to stay through. What does the data say? Well, this is Fernando Alonso against Fernando Alonso. The lap where he goes in too deep at 15 is in the red, and his previous best in Q1 is in the blue. And you can see that through these early corners here, he's quite a lot earlier on the brakes, as Albon was saying over the radio. He was early on the brakes everywhere. He's early again. He's very slow through this castle section. The speed trace of the red just significantly down on that of the blue when he was on a flying lap earlier on and desperate to get through. He's pressing on the second lap, but this is not a fully fledged flying lap, I don't think, from Fernando. And that is kind of shown as well here by the time loss that he's got here. He's got a significant time loss over what he's done before. It's the 1.11 seconds that he's got on his dash. And then we get to the corner where he goes off, and he actually goes in a little bit deeper then for this one on the red, brakes a little bit later, and maybe that is what provokes the car and means he can't stop it. You get this steering trace up here that looks like he's sort of fighting the car a little bit at the rear end, and off he goes. So I think this is what could be a saving grace. He did go in a little bit deeper. There is the steering trace that is looking like he's fighting the rear end of the car. But if we compare him to Alex Albon then, who's the car behind him in the Williams, then you can see actually Albon's braking later than Alonso. The blue line there coming down later than the red line of Alonso. Alonso doesn't make the corner. Albon does, with a lot of margin as well, that he can see Fernando going off to the right and still make it through without being absolutely on the limit. So Albon was kind of right as well in that point, saying he's braking early. He's very early on the corners before, and fundamentally goes off the road at the end of Q1 and gets away with it because no one manages to significantly improve. The cars that were already out stay out. And Alonso carries on. And actually, he had a pretty good race weekend thereafter. It was just interesting to see. And we've got a lot of these street circuits as well at the moment. Now, I was surprised that the FIA didn't look into this. We've seen famous examples of the past. Michael Schumacher at Rascasse. We've had Nico Rosberg got away with one in Monaco that looked also a little bit dubious. But the problem is with it, it's very difficult to say categorically that someone has deliberately gone off the road and tried to provoke a yellow flag. I think in this example, this looks one of the most obvious cases that you can see, but you still don't know for sure whether he's not just had a lapse of concentration or he's not just been startled by something, and that's what's caused Fernando to go through into the runoff area. And I think the whole rule here needs looking at. It's something that Alex Albon again said after qualifying. We've got more and more street circuits coming onto the calendar now. We've got Jeddah now on the calendar, we've got Miami, we've got Las Vegas race coming next year as well, and more the calendar's moving towards street circuits where there is the potential for red flags late in the day, yellow flags late in the day. We saw it again with Monaco this year with Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso hitting the wall right at the end. We saw it in Monaco before with Charles Leclerc. We see it time and time again, and I think maybe there needs to be more of an argument again for looking into should drivers who cause yellow flags and cause red flags late in the session, should they be able to keep their lap time? Because there is room for a little bit of exploitation here. And for example, Carlos Sainz did a brilliant lap at the end of Q3, or at the start of Q3 I should say, But then his second lap in Q3 wasn't so good. He lost time in turn 2, had to back off it. If he had done something similar and went off-road, got stuck in a runoff area, he could have had pole position there. So it's just one of those things that can be exploited. I think possibly it was exploited by Fernando on Saturday in Baku, and maybe the FIA need to look at this and stop it coming on as a bigger issue moving forward.
He needs to get penalised, this guy. He has to. This is ridiculous. He was doing it the whole lap. He was driving slowly on purpose. It was so obvious how he went off the track. It was ridiculous.
That was my thoughts on Albon's complaints about Fernando Alonso at the end of Q1, but there was loads more action through qualifying and the race. Check it out on F1 TV.